The fog clung to the fields like ghosts unwilling to leave. Dawn crept across northern France, the kind of pale light that turns everything gray and silent before the thunder of war resumes. The men of the 3rd Armored Division had learned to fear silence. It meant something was waiting. Sergeant Wilhanley leaned against the cold side of his Sherman and lit the stub of a lucky strike. He had survived enough firefights to know the smell of quiet before death, but today felt different. Off in the distance, half buried in mud, a dark shape sat skewed in a dish. Its cannon pointed skyward, broken like a finger pleading for mercy. A German Panzer IV. The tank was still steaming, its armor scorched and its treads twisted off the wheels. Hanley squinted through the haze, half expecting the turret hatch to swing open with a desperate gun barrel pointing back. But the battlefield had gone mute except for the wind dragging torn canvas across the ground. Lieutenant Carter approached, his boots heavy with mud and disbelief. "Christ, look at it," he murmured. "They said these bastards were indestructible." Hanley stubbed his cigarette in the mud. "Guess nobody told that one." Behind them, Private Dorsey clambered over the wreck, careful where the metal still sizzled from the morning air. "It's not blown through, sir," he called down. "Looks like the engine burned itself out. Shell didn't even hit the front." That made Hanley pause. Not the front. He'd seen 75mm shells bounce off German tanks like marbles against stone. The idea that this one had died from inside, that it had simply broken, unsettled him more than any bullet. The lieutenant motioned for the crew to secure the area. No movement inside. No booby traps. The war was teaching them paranoia in hourly lessons. Only after 2 engineers crawled across the hull did Carter climb up himself. Hanley followed, his boots echoing hollow against the steel. The Panzer smelled of oil, blood, and something chemical, the odor of machinery that had outlived its owners. Inside the hatch lay 2 German crewmen, one slumped over the gun breech, another sprawled by the radio. Their faces were streaked with soot, frozen mid-motion. Hanley looked away. He'd stopped counting the faces months ago. Carter crouched near the turret ring, running a hand along the interior wall. 50mm, he said under his breath, reading the faint stenciling still visible through grime. "What's that?" Hanley asked. "The armor." "Only 50. Carter's voice was part disbelief, part revelation. All this talk about their invincible tanks, and the front plate's 50mm. Barely 2 inches. Hanley tapped the metal with his knuckle. It gave a dull, thin echo. "You're telling me we've been scared of this tin can?" "Seems that way," Carter said. "But it's how they use it, not what it's made of." They spent the morning examining it. The engineers measured the angles, noted the weld seams, the thickness of the mantlet. Every line seemed purposeful, designed for efficiency, not excess. German precision. But the myth of the unkillable Panzer was cracking right there under Hanley's gloves. When they pried open a side panel, the truth came out like a confession. Thin layers, sharp edges, simple bolts. 50 in the front, 30 on the sides, Carter muttered, jotting in his notebook. "Hell, even our 75 can punch through that if we get close enough." Hanley looked out at the empty horizon. Close enough meant exposed. Exposed meant dead. "Then why do so many of ours burn before they do?" he asked quietly. The lieutenant didn't answer. By noon the sky had cleared to a harsh blue. Command wanted the Panzer towed to the rear for study, and the men grumbled as they hooked cables and chains through its chassis. Every clang felt like dragging a trophy, but a cursed one. As they rolled, locals peeked from shattered barns, eyes hollow, children clutching doorframes. To them, both tanks, German or American, were monsters of equal appetite. Hanley met their stares and felt the same guilt he'd carried since Normandy. Liberation looked a lot like destruction when seen from the ruins. That night, around a campfire near a hedgerow, Hanley listened as Dorsey replayed the day's discovery for the men who hadn't seen it. Only 50mm. You could poke through that with a sharpened spoon. Laughter erupted, harsh and nervous. Carter said nothing. He sat apart, flipping through his field notebook, every line of measurement underlined twice. Finally he spoke, voice low. "Don't get cocky. That armor's thin." But they knew how to fight with it. Angled plates, disciplined crews. Our advantage is knowing now, not boasting. Hanley nodded, poking the fire with a stick. The sparks flew upward like tracer rounds disappearing into night. Later, when he lay in his foxhole, the image wouldn't leave him. That panzer, crippled and hollow, its myth peeled back to bare steel. He thought of how fear multiplies in the dark, how rumor becomes weapon. Maybe the real strength of the Germans had never been the armor itself but the belief it inspired, in them and in everyone who faced them. Somewhere down the line, an artillery shell screamed and landed far away, rumbling like thunder beyond the hills. The war kept breathing. And tomorrow they would roll again. In the early hours, a mechanic named Travers woke them all. "You should see this," he said, pointing at the panzer under the tarp. He'd spent the night poking through its internals, tracing cables and valves. "This transmission, it's lighter than ours. Gear ratio's clever. They saved weight everywhere." Hanley watched as Travers lifted a panel to show the stripped-down mechanism. Efficiency, again. Not brute strength but cunning. It dawned on Hanley that their enemy had built these machines for speed and surprise, not for indestructibility. The myth of the Iron Monster was propaganda, nothing more. He exhaled slowly, the first honest relief he'd felt in weeks. If the panzer could be broken, then so could the war. But none of them knew what awaited beyond the next ridge. The Tigers, the new beasts with armor twice as thick, guns that could pierce a Sherman from a mile out. The discovery of one weakness only opened the door to a greater fear. As dawn rose again, Carter climbed onto the tank and looked toward the east. "We'll send this back," he said. "Let the brass tear it apart. Maybe they'll finally believe what's possible." Hanley smiled faintly. "Yeah, maybe they'll stop calling us lucky when we win." The wind carried the faint scent of diesel and earth. The panzer's gun pointed toward the sky, frozen mid-defiance, like a monument to every lie men told about war, that machines could make them gods, that steel could protect them from truth. Hanley flicked his lighter once more, the flame trembling in the morning breeze. 50 millimeters, he whispered. "Guess even giants have thin skin."